Tom Hanks, welcome to 7:30.
It's good to be back.
Now, the making of a major motion picture. It's the biggest love letter to movie making. It's startlingly original. It's also very close up with the everyday struggles, what your characters called the blur of movie making, as well as the magic. What made you write it?
Something between hubris and attention deficit disorder. The desire that I always have when it comes down to talking to anybody about what they do, how they do it, how they ended up doing it in the first place, is the destruction of tropes, of getting rid of the myths, of getting rid of the common and oftentimes, almost 100% of the time, inaccurate generalities of people assuming that art happens in a certain way or industry happens in a certain way, that takes out the human condition of life really is just one damn thing after another. And it is often perpetrated by folks who are volatile, who are under an awful lot of pressure, who have origins and intentions far beyond those that you might be meeting with any general day. And the desire to write really just comes from the same instinctive thrust I have as an actor, is that I love to tell stories and I like to hear stories. There is a great freedom from sitting down at the blank canvas of a computer screen or a piece of paper and saying, what do I want to say about what I do for a living? I can't really do it necessarily with the pronoun of I, but I can do it from a perspective of an outsider looking in.
Now, let's just get a few facts on the table for anyone who hasn't read it yet. It's got, as well as the story, as well as a number of narratives, it's got comic books that contain the origin story of the film and even a screenplay attached. Why did you want all those pieces included?
Well, when I was growing up, I felt, without knowing it, that a lot of the comic books that I read were actually versions of what is called pre-visualizations or storyboards, that comic books actually do have a cinematic narrative to them of close-ups, of wide shots, of silhouettes and shadows, of lighting. And the origin for literally the character that originates the motion picture character that comes about it, a character called Firefall, did in fact come from the reading of comic books when he was a very young man. The second comic book is essentially an underground comic from the 1970s, and that deals with the theme of somebody like a flamethrower in the war. And the third comic book is the modern kind of like graphic novel treatment of the movie that was just made. Those actually speak for themselves in a way that you don't have to waste an awful lot of verbiage in order to get there. You look at the panel, you read what they say, and you carry it along with it. And that alone is kind of like a full-on realized chapter of the book without it having been put down in prose. The actual screenplay for the movie, which I had to pause the writing of the novel in order to complete, because I realized that I was going to try to describe day 1 out of 52, day 8 out of 52, shooting day number 23 out of day 52, and I needed to know what they were shooting and what the thematic elements and stakes were going to be. So I wrote the screenplay in order to inform the rest of the movie and also give people, look, it's an option. They don't have to read the screenplay. They can look at it the way anybody kind of like would if they're making a movie and here's what happens. But if you want to get into, I think, the better trope-busting process of how movies are made, read what is on the page of the screenplay, like a blueprint, and then hear the report of how they actually shot that day, and then perhaps see the movie at the end of it. It's not unlike walking into a fabulous building, a great piece of architecture, and getting a look at the original artist renditions, the renderings, and the blueprints of it. You might help you understand just how hard it is to create something where there was absolutely nothing.
Now, in fact, some of the best characters in the book are the people working behind the scenes in the blur, as I just referred to. The detail of that is so much fun to read. I wondered, have you been keeping notes for decades?
Let me tell you, the greatest thing I will tell you, the second greatest thing about making movies, besides people bringing you a sandwich anytime you want to and getting free haircuts, is the give and take of how people ended up doing what they're doing. The stories of other things that happened in motion pictures that both you witnessed and both you heard about. I had let me just say, my makeup man for many, many years was named the late Danny Streepek. I think I made 7, 8, 9, 10 motion pictures with him. And it wasn't until the third movie I made with him, and when I asked him, how did you get started in this? Where he would drop a story about a movie that he said, that was when I was in Vegas working with Elvis. And I said, excuse me, you were in Vegas working with Elvis? Oh, yeah, I did. I did a ton of those Elvis movies. They knocked him off in 21 days. I said, so you did Viva Las Vegas with Elvis? Then later on, I also find out that he did Laurence Olivier's nose in Spartacus. And then he did Tony Curtis and Yul Brynner and Taurus Bulba. The amount of, wait a minute, go back a little bit and explain to me some of the stuff that went on to that. Danny Streepek worked on Giant and the Magnificent Seven. So when you start hearing the nuts and bolts about how a grip, an electrician, a DP, one of your co-stars, somebody who wrote it, how they ended up doing what they're doing, you realize that it's a peripatetic journey that we all take that somehow, miraculously, magically, ended up with you working on them on the same day on the same project. And how everybody gets there is as varied as anything you will read in mythology or history or fantasy. And it always fascinates me. And it's always a really great hang. Hey, tell us a story about working with so-and-so. Next thing you know, 3.5 hours go by in a blink of an eye.
It also reads like a roman à clef, and I imagine in Hollywood where you are, there's going to be a lot of people trying to work out who the characters are. So are you the director with the typewriter, Bill Johnson, or is it a bit of Steven Spielberg? And who is the odious OK Bailey?
I will tell you this. I have witnessed everything that has happened in the motion, in the book, in the course of making the movies. I have also been the cause of any number of moments of Sturm und Drang myself. I will tell you, like, for example, I remember being so angry in a movie that I was not going to be able to, I was not going to be allowed to wear sunglasses in a scene. And I threw a fit. Explain to me why in every other movie I see people wearing sunglasses all the time. And they want to keep you happy because of the star. They also want to be able to shoot without having to take time out of it. So I have seen and also been the cause of every moment that happens. The directors, there's nobody that is a singular example of a very specific person. But I see common traits in all of them. Between Paul Greengrass and Baz Luhrmann and Nora Ephron and Stephen and Penny Marshall and Ron Howard is the character of Bill Johnson, the director. And out of every first AD is Yogi, our first AD. Out of every actor that I've worked with is all the other actors. And even the troubled ones, you know, there's no, just because you have the job and you show up on that day, that doesn't mean you're living the life that makes it easier in order to do that job. And you could come down to certain performers, and guess what? A lot of performers essentially have middle child issues that they haven't really worked out. And just because they decide to be number one on the call sheet doesn't mean they end up acting like number one of the call sheet. And I confess to you right now, guilty as charged. I've done it many times myself.
The first part of the story is about a returning serviceman. Now, you've been involved in different ways in some of the best war stories ever made: Saving Private Ryan, Band of Brothers, The Pacific, Greyhound. I'll stop the list. What is it? Is it the high pitch of human intensity, or also something about the era you grew up in, that long post-war America?
Well, I specifically wanted to choose a Marine Corps veteran from the Pacific in order to base essentially hang the major narrative of one of the characters on, because I have made it a study and I remain fascinated by those years of stasis in which young people went off and joined the war, and the entire world was engulfed in this in a worldwide global conflagration, for which there was no clue as to how long it was going to last and what the outcome would be. I grew up, and all of the caregivers, anybody who was as old as my dad, and some younger, always talked about their lives in three very distinctive chapters: before the war, during the war, and after the war. I mean, even look, in 1964, when I was watching the Beatles appear on the Ed Sullivan Show here in the United States, that was only 20 years after fighting for islands in the Pacific and the liberating of concentration camps throughout Europe. 20 years is the wink of an eye in a human being's experience. And in the course of Bob Falls, who is the character that is the model for this, to be 18 years old, to sign up in order to go off and defend the world and end up being asked to kill an awful lot of people and to witness the killing of an awful lot of people that he ended up knowing, is a scarring experience that never goes away. I read at one point, in fact, that the origins of a number of motorcycle gangs in Southern California was a direct result of the Pacific War. Marines came back from Iwo Jima and Saipan and Guadalcanal and Tinian, name the battle. And there was no way in hell they were going to be able to pick up their lives as they had left them as 17 or 18-year-old boys. They had to then go off and exercise or live with the demons that they brought back with them. And they did it on the back of a motorcycle, raising hell wherever they went. That, to me, is almost the perfect vernacular for the cost of what the war did for somebody. And it does not go away. And it's also not locked into that time and place. Anybody who has gone through a tour of duty, not knowing if they were going to survive or not, whether it be in Iraq or Afghanistan or the ongoing wars that travel around with us, they end up carrying the same sense of the cost of that stasis and the cost of the, and I think it's something that remains to be amongst the greatest stories ever told, and it has been ever since we were cavemen talking about the battle we had with a mammoth down by the glacier walls.
I said before, it's a book about the magic of movie making and as opposed to streaming. And I wondered how much you were motivated by the disappointment you had when your submarine movie Greyhound went straight to streaming, robbing audiences of some of its great picture and sound quality.
Well, there are two things that I wanted to be able to address, literally because of the time that was going on when I wrote the book. One was COVID-19. So there are COVID protocols that we make references to, and the entire movie had to be made under them. And along with that, the cost, the ripple effect of COVID-19 was the advent of streaming. Now, streaming at the time was just a thing that it was a shift in the rippled waters of show business at the time, right up until I finished writing the book and turned it in. And now we are into the second phase of this. I don't know if streaming is good. I don't know if streaming is bad. I only know that it exists, and it's the reality that everybody who tells a story professionally, with the hope that people will pay money in order to see it and take part of it, are wrestling with even as we speak. The economic aspects of making the movies, in flux. They always have been. Some movies are hits and make a ton of money. Some movies are lousy and are never seen again. That is going to still remain, whether you're watching it at home on a beanbag chair in your underwear, or if you're paying and standing in line in order to join 2,500 other people in your local cinema, and you're hoping in order to get a seat so that you can partake. I guess what I'm saying is the sort of like the contract that the filmmakers have with the audience and the audience has with the filmmakers remains intact. The software is what is in question. How is it that we're going to see? How is it going to be delivered unto us? That is the physical boundary between us and the story, but it does not affect the intellectual or the emotional impact or the investment that the audience makes and the filmmaker makes with the audience. It has to be good. It has to be involving. It has to be so passionate that even if you turn off the TV, or better yet, let's say that right now, join the other stream of people as they're leaving with the cinema, you are thinking in the back of your head, man, I'm glad they made that movie, and I am really glad I saw it.
Now, I'm just going to quote from Bill Johnson, the director in the film. He taps out on his typewriter. Why is one film a pleasant cruise and others are cage matches? Do you, Tom Hanks, know the answer to that yet?
I do not know. There is no telling. I can only say this. Yeah, I embrace the chaos theory. I remember sitting on one of the more popular, well-remembered movies I made with a director named Bob. I was sitting on a park bench in Savannah, Georgia, dressed up in an interesting costume with a suitcase full of props next to me. And I turned to Bob, my director, and said, Bob, is anybody going to care about this guy sitting on a park bench telling this story? And Bob said to me, it's a minefield, Tom. It's just a minefield. We got to walk through it and find out if we're sowing the seeds of our own destruction or if we're actually doing the world a favor by telling this story. And there is, all you can do is have faith in your own instincts and in the qualities of the coalition that you put together, and then bow down in humble submission to the goddess Pellicula, who seems to govern us all when it comes down to our fates about making movies, whether they work or not.
As well as the art and the randomness watched over by the goddess of film you mentioned there, it's also a paean of praise to great luminous acting, and in this case, the scenes between Ike and Ren. At this stage in your career, do you know what it is that creates that luminous quality? What happens when two great actors fire?
I think I know it the same way any filmmaker knows it when they see something and it's undeniable up on screen. I don't think I've ever been in a movie in which everybody was secretly hoped, geez, I hope we have that luminous quality, shared between us. And it can come out, in the reasons why you said yes to the project in the first place, then given away to the vagaries of timing and contract and availability and all that. The thing is, dare I say it, Sarah, is you have no idea if it's happening on screen or not. You cannot trust anybody to come back from rushes or dailies or whatever you want to say. Anybody who says, the dailies are fantastic, honestly, you have to say, how do you know? It's not cut together yet. I mean, is it in focus? Is it sharp? Did we say the words correctly? Yes. This other thing happens, and you've seen movies where it's undeniable. You've also seen movies where it is undeniably not present. And it's not a poker hand. Sometimes you can sweep the table with, a pair of threes because everybody else folds. And other times you think you got, full house, jacks and aces, and you lose to somebody with a straight flush. There's no telling what can happen in it, but all you can have is faith in the moment, faith in the time that you spend. I'll tell you this, and this is, maybe people don't quite understand that, and I just figured this out about, I'm going to say maybe 2 movies ago. Movies are made in real time, and that real time is that exact moment that you are doing it. Later on, ants crawl all over it, people polish it, people alter it, people make it better by way of sound. People actually improve upon the emotional quality of the scene and the investment on scene with music, or the lack of music sometimes comes along as what is necessary. There's no telling if you've got it or not until you see it. And that's the reason why we all have middle child issues, and at some point or another end up, ending the workday by, upchucking our lunch behind the stage door as we're trying to leave and get back out to our. We don't know if it's there or not. We can only pray that it does, and have faith in each other that everybody brought their game.
Tom Hanks, I had many, many more questions. It's a wonderful read, but on that moment, because it's such a perfect description and a perfect thing for us all to consider, the moment where art happens. Thank you very much indeed for joining us.
I loved it. Thank you very much for having me. And it's good to be at 7. Is it 8 o'clock yet? What time is it?
Yes.
How much time do we take out of the 7:30 hour?
At least you didn't school me like the director does about lazy journalists. So thank you very much, and good luck with the book. It's terrific. Thank you.
Pleasure. Thank you. Lovely talking to you. Enjoy.